Thank you very much. Got my little zapper here. The usual disclaimers when we talk about forecasts. Nothing is guaranteed. Roskill was established over 90 years ago in the UK, and we still have our headquarters in the UK. Since then, our work in the critical materials supply chain has grown, and today we are the leader in our field across market reports, consulting, sustainability and cost reporting, as well as in events. Over the years, Roskill has expanded its footprint to gain valuable in-market intelligence, as well as increasing the ability to service our customers on a global scale. The continued expansion has most recently resulted in Perth and Sydney being added to the map, as well as an office in Dubai. Our business is based on 4 key streams, which are market reports. These are very comprehensive, deep dive commodity reports that are followed up by other quarterly and or monthly updates as the market moves throughout the year. This provides our clients with a comprehensive, up-to-date overview of the market in which they operate in. Our consulting division provides both strategic and advisory consulting on both vertical and horizontal aspects of the supply chain. Our consulting group also draws on the extensive research that sits behind both the market reports, the sustainability cost reports, and as well as the events we conduct and participate in. Our sustainability and cost analysis product suite provides a very detailed analysis of the cost structures as well as a comprehensive view on sustainability. Both those products are done on an asset-by-asset basis across a number of the key raw materials which we cover. These services are all complemented by a series of events, both virtual and in person, although a little bit more rare these days, as well as a free on-the-road series of events we conduct. These are done across the world and covers a large range of raw materials, including battery raw materials, and our next Australian event is planned for March here in Perth, and that will focus specifically on the lithium industry. We cover over 35 different products on the periodic table, and we have grouped those into 4 main groups where we can see significant synergies and thereby allowing us to provide a more holistic analysis for our clients. These are battery and electric vehicle materials, which is the group I'm a part of. We got steel alloys, technology metals, and strategic minerals. They don't operate in a vacuum, these ones. There are crossovers, and we draw on each other's expertise to further provide a broader insight into the industries. The battery and electric vehicle group not only covers the battery raw materials we're talking about today, but it also provides analysis and products covering the first-use markets, such as anode, cathode, and the batteries themselves, as well as the end-use markets in specifically electric vehicles. These are some of the annual reports we release. They're not all of them. As you can see, there's quite an extensive part. On the left-hand side, the battery and electric vehicle materials is probably more relevant for the people here today. But that covers, as I said before, not only just the products, but also lithium-ion batteries, cathode and precursor materials, as well as electric vehicles. Moving on into the electric vehicle market, which is by far the biggest driver for our industry going forward. It is no secret that the outlook for electric vehicle industry and the associated supply chains are very promising. Some of the presenters earlier this morning have said and echoed the exact same sentiment. Last year, the total number of vehicles sold globally declined 21% year on year, while the sales of electric vehicles increased 42%. This growth is partly driven by consumer sentiment, financial incentives such as increased scrap values for older cars when you buy low-emission cars. I believe in France that has been up to about $9,000, as well as potential penalties imposed by vehicle manufacturers if they fail to lower the total emission profile of their fleet. All of these things are very specifically focused on Europe at the moment. But China, which is the largest EV market in the world, at least up until recently, they have had other incentives, which include easier access to vehicle permits for electric vehicles, as well as an ability to use electric vehicles 7 days a week in some cities, where an internal combustion engine vehicle has only been able to be used 6 days a week. So different set of incentives, but all leading to the same thing, which is a very, very bright future for this. These changes and incentives have led OEMs to increase the number of vehicles. The demand has been there in terms of financial incentives, but the consumer sentiment as well. And when you increase the choice of models available to the public, there is a better uptake, and you set off a demand spiral, which is what we're seeing here. On the chart on the right-hand side, you see a breakdown of electric vehicle and plug-in hybrid electric vehicles and the uptake we are forecasting between now and 2030. We're looking at a growth, an annual compounded growth rate of about 23% year on year between 2020 and 2030 to reach about 22 million vehicles by 2030. The stronger growth in sales of electric vehicles globally will lead to a significant increase in demand for batteries, with lithium-ion batteries being the clear technological leader. The commitment to lithium-ion batteries has been made, with plants being built both for cathode and batteries, as well as OEMs basing their strategies alongside this technology. That trend is not easy to reverse with the amount of money that's been invested both by OEMs and battery manufacturers globally. We forecast that demand growth for batteries will be slightly higher than growth foreseen in electric vehicles as the battery size also increases. Overall, we forecast the growth for battery capacity to be about 23.5% in the 10-year period to reach almost 2.5 terawatt hours by 2030. On top of the strong growth forecast in the automotive segment, we are also forecasting strong growth in stationary energy storage and motive products. Our forecast shows that demand in 2027 from non-electric vehicle segments combined will be larger than the whole market is today. That leads us into looking at what's actually inside those batteries. The growth in the EVs and the battery size are not the only aspect that influence demand for our raw materials. The battery chemistry used in batteries will also play a key part. Our analysis show that demand of batteries containing LFP cathode is expected to continue to grow, reaching 41% of the market by 2030. That would be the peak, as we see it at the moment, for LFP batteries. LFP batteries have had a revival in China, but also increasingly seen as being a driver in low-value vehicles across the rest of the world. The combined low-cost structure of LFP compared to high nickel chemistries will attract that non-prestige segments in Europe and North America. However, nickel batteries, high nickel batteries, is forecast to continue to show very strong growth as well. When you look at the right-hand side of the chart up here, you get the impression that high nickel batteries are decreasing in size. It's not the case. They're still growing at a very, very fast rate. They're just the proportion are getting slightly smaller because LFP is growing in the time period we're looking at here. All the raw materials used in those batteries today will continue to remain critical throughout this decade, but it's possible the list of required product types is likely to grow to include other materials such as lithium metal when solid-state batteries are entering the electric vehicle supply chain, which could be towards the end of this decade or beginning of the next. In the following slides, I will use this context and go a little bit deeper into some of the key raw materials used in batteries. We'll start with lithium. The growth and changes discussed in the previous slides will drive the lithium demand going forward. We use a bottom-up approach, which shows that lithium demand is likely to increase on average about 19% per year between 2020 and 2030, while demand growth for lithium carbonate will be strong at below that number at 17%. The strongest growth will be in lithium hydroxide, where we're forecasting a 27% growth, albeit from a much, much lower base compared to lithium carbonate. We forecast that the supply of lithium compounds will keep up with the demand until the middle of the decade, when a supply deficit is forecast to occur. This deficit will continue to grow unless additional capacity, which is currently unknown, is added to the supply picture. The supply deficit for battery-grade lithium hydroxide is forecast to occur before lithium carbonate, as supply is added less quickly and demand is stronger. The increasing focus on ESG aspects, which I think everybody has touched on today, of the raw material supply chain is likely to play into the overall supply and demand picture. An increasing number of OEMs are taking ESG into consideration when choosing their suppliers and their supply chain. Sourcing verified conflict-free raw material with the smallest emission footprint will be a very high priority for them. Adherence and reporting of these aspects are likely to become an order qualifier rather than an order winner going forward. Any company that cannot demonstrate its credentials are unlikely to be invited to the negotiating table of the Tier 1 supply chain. This is one of the aspects I see Australia has a huge advantage in. We have rule of law, we know how to treat people, and we know how to do mining. It's a huge benefit for Australia. With LFP taking a larger part of the market, as I showed earlier, and high nickel battery chemistries aiming to reduce the cobalt needed, it does not eliminate the need for cobalt altogether. Strong growth in the electric vehicle numbers will drive demand for cobalt going forward. We forecast that demand is likely to increase about 7% per year in this decade. Supply of larger volumes of cobalt is concentrated at a very few very large mines. The timing of a restart of mines in the Democratic Republic of Congo will be a determining factor for medium-term market balances. Longer-term price need to stay at a reasonable level to incentivize new investment to support that growth. As I mentioned with lithium, an additional aspect is around ESG. The majority of cobalt is mined in the DRC, a country which has been struggling to prove its ESG credentials. This is an added challenge for the cobalt supply chain going forward, although it can provide benefits for some other countries and suppliers. On the nickel side, the nickel market is less concentrated on the battery industry than we have seen with lithium and to some extent cobalt, as the majority of demand is and will continue to come from stainless steel. In 2020, stainless steel accounted about 72% of primary nickel demand. By 2030, this will be 57%, so still a very, very large proportion of the demand. And the whole market is estimated to grow about 4%. In comparison, the batteries, which accounted for 6% last year, will account for 28% in 2030 and show a growth rate of about 23%. So indeed, very, very strong growth from this segment. With the growing demand for cathodes based on high nickel chemistries, the demand for suitable nickel sulfate is forecast to grow considerably. The demand for nickel sulfate from lithium-ion batteries is forecast at a similar level in this decade. And while supply is set to increase in the coming years, it is possible a supply deficit could happen in this segment suited to batteries, and new feedstock types and processing routes may need to be considered. All of these will have to be economical from developers' point of view, but also sustainable from a supply chain point of view. Besides the three key raw materials which I've covered here, we are also considering graphite used in the anode, and I know there has been a few presentations today on graphite, as well as the rare earth product, which are essential in the motors driving the electric vehicles. On the graphite side, a forecast surplus supply of natural flake diamonds will represent mainly lower grade material produced alongside battery grades. It does not subtly mean a surplus of material available to the battery market, although we do believe that between China and increasing African production, battery demand will be met during most of the years in the forecast period. On the rare earth side, is not strictly a battery raw material, but it has strong links to this industry. A number of rare earth materials are used in the permanent magnets used in the motors driving these electric vehicles. Two of the key rare earth products of neodymium and dysprosium are both forecast to show a tight supply and demand balance in the coming years, with a longer-term outlook to supply deficit. In summary, the ongoing evolution in electric vehicles will drive very strong demand for critical raw materials. Governments around the world are realizing that in order to decarbonize, they will need batteries, and as a result, the list of raw materials have been identified across multiple countries. Governments are putting in place policies to not only ensure that there is sufficient raw material available for targets to be met, but also that these materials are ethical and the supply security is in place to ensure that any geopolitical events will not jeopardize those targets. Of the raw materials, we will see the strongest growth in nickel sulfate for use in batteries, followed by lithium and cobalt. These multiples are staggering. For nickel sulfate, demand is forecast to grow 7-fold, and for lithium 6-fold in this decade. Any industry that shows that kind of growth rate is going to be interesting to observe. As I mentioned at the start, Roskill are able to assist any companies and governments in understanding the markets and the outlook through our comprehensive research and the consulting services we provide. These are some of the relevant reports we have, either just released or are likely to release in the near future. Lithium-ion batteries, later this month. Cathode and precursors was released just a few months ago. Our lithium report, the 18th edition, so we have a long history in lithium here. That will be released at the end of July. Our cobalt one was released in October last year. Our nickel sulfate was released in April. Our rare earth was released in January. And our graphite one will be released in October this year. If you wish to discuss any of these further, I'm sure we're planning to have a little Q&A session later, but both myself and my colleague Michael are here all day and happy to take any questions or discussions you would be interested in. Just want to finish off with a map and note that both Perth and Sydney has been put on the map for Roskill, and we are here and ready to meet with you all and have a discussion of this very, very interesting market we're all operating in. Thank you.